Persistent, soggy crickets. I think they broke out all of the life rafts on this one. And they're not going away. They're going to be persistent, soggy crickets. And we might be seeing quite the wet winter, spring. But the crickets will persist. That said, as I keep telling you, it's not going to take everybody. It'd be nice that the more the merrier, the faster all this stuff would change around if we finally got ourselves straightened up. But there's anybody who takes on a wrong and wants to make it right, I think will fix the problems. It's a matter of doing that. And just to let you know that it's not all doom and gloom, I just got word this week that someone who had been working on a project for quite a long time, almost by himself, prevailed against a parasitic system that wanted to come and create a parasitic pollution control district on a bunch of people. Just 10% of which those people would have voted against the rest. And he was able to persist by going down to his county, learning what he needed to learn, and he persisted even against a bar member parasite. So, congratulations to his efforts and his accomplishment. And as I tell you, just engaging in all this, the reason why we are this far along, in part, and I say in part because until we get rid of this financial servitude as well, until we find the alternative that works in a medium for this financial construct, that's always going to be another part that we have to deal with. But in the part that oppresses your life day to day, the people that think that they're making laws and making things that they're going to tax you some more, you have a say right now, and it's gotten to the point that it is because we have been silent. And so this is where we come behind the woodshed to learn a lot of that and a lot of other things, to find out all the subject matter areas that we can work, maybe to hopefully excite you to do something to take up your skills and apply them. When we were told that, maybe it was just a phrase to us, we were told that freedom wasn't free, and we all have to be ever vigilant against its encroachment. This really comes to bear in practice. It's nothing. It's not just a phrase. It prevailed, and he left. He had to be there all the time and be the meetings and be the voice of research and knowledge, and build a strategy that worked against an organized offensive to take just suck away more people's wealth from people who are professing to be authority or creating within the state law. See, this is the other thing that gets me about all this. We've allowed state laws that provide for these avenues of violation. And so that's another whole other thing that has to go on here that we have to start looking at. It was admitted, if you just listen around, it's admitted that the laws come flying out of these governments, this state governments, so fast that nobody really actually checks them for constitutionality. And so there has to be some effort made to stop this court-created, bar association-created presumption of constitutionality. And we saw that firsthand as a mining district addressing the various bills that came through of that year. Some thousands of bills went through. We could only handle we handled every one we saw. We handled about 20-something of them, just for mining and water and things like that. And it's just you could just watch all these bills all have violations in the left and right, and they end up becoming so-called law, and we sit back and do nothing about it. And this is how they've encroached upon our lives. And I know it's maybe one little victory in one little place, and it's not over. I'm certain those people will come back in some future time in that one place to try and put on another servitude. And there's going to be lots more, but it is an example of a win, of a victory, of one less encroachment happening someplace. As I tell you, that was just one. There's a little bit of help, but mainly the efforts of someone. And I'll tell you, it took a whole lot more than just sitting behind a keyboard and kind of get out there. But one of the things I tried and touch base on is trying not to get locked into, it's like I say, it's beyond talking. We can talk about a lot of this stuff. In fact, a comment came out through the chat, one of the chat rooms at RLM. We can define what anarchy is. I say, well, you got to execute on it. You can't keep explaining it. You got to execute on it. You got to do. And the definition of anarchy went through, and you read it, and it's. I looked at that, and I said, well, that's what. In response to it, I said, well, that's what a mining district does. Mining districts were set up. Essentially, people had to protect themselves and wanted to be peaceful amongst themselves, and really didn't have any more discussion than that. And now we live in a time when the people have learned they could use at least the costume of government to plunder. And as we hear, not unknown just today, but Lysander Spooner again should explain that very clearly to me if I hadn't understood it before, as I was living in my little idyllic state, even though it wasn't so simple and things weren't so idyllic. We just kind of put up with a lot of this nonsense. But some of this is misinformation, and I want to use this story you may have heard just to point out something that I was keen on in the beginning, and wanted to show how the distinction and the difference between two different events that came from essentially the same area, at least what I can see, that can show you how quickly it is that you can start learning how not to be driven off and into the weeds about some story that comes up. Like you see this made-for-TV Jordanian pilot movie that came out to try and incite the people, and you see how well that works. I hope you all see that. That worked really well. Now the Jordanian people now are all rallied up. They're going to go down bomb Syria again. Now, and you know that Jordan is the mouthpiece of the United States, so it's not. This is a beautiful method that they've gotten to rally people up. It really works really well. So they lead you by the nose. So to get that ring out of your nose, they lead you by the nose, and you. And I say you in general, and how the general populace does, not anybody particular, and probably not a high percent of us not behind Woodshed. But you have to see this dynamic so that you can hopefully explain it to people when the opportunity comes up to try and point to people that they need to, they need to do anything, that there is a different way to see this, or that it has a different function. Or as I've done, you look at a series of similar executions upon the same methodology to get people to be doing something or doing the wrong thing is really, it seems to me. But anyway, this Fukushima thing came up, and we had that little disaster over there, and I told you they were going to have trouble over there. That the likelihood of it coming here, first of all, was impossible at the time, but also the water and stuff would be sucked up by the eddies in the Pacific Ocean and all that kind of thing. We've been through all that, but here's a direct example where we can see that the air could have gone here, and how it would have been even more obvious had this happened. Now, I don't know if you've heard, a mystery ash covers parts of Washington and Oregon states. There was in this rain that came in through the northwest, there developed this ash that came out, gray, milky water that was coming out of the sky. A substance described as white stuff, and milky rain is covered. Who said stuff is not proper statement? All right, white stuff and milky rain is covering parts of Washington and Oregon states, but its origin is a mystery, was the first starting of this. We have received reports of white stuff on vehicles. The ash is more than likely from a volcano, Shivuluk, which I think is out of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Now, that was the initial report. And if you looked at the pictures really closely, it did look like ash, but then there was some that was also soot. My point here is when you actually looked at what's been going on, and you tracked back the jet stream, and somebody did this, and I found a video, so you'll be able to see this in the Blogcaster page. If you go there, you can download it. And he tracks, this guy tracks the jet stream, and he identifies the more likely place for this and what it is. And lo and behold, it comes directly out of Japan, and it's a volcano there instead of out of Russia. And I would agree with the Japanese point. Now, the point about what I mentioned about Fukushima, that's a direct. It's south, I think, south of Fukushima. The point is that as I was telling you back in 2011, that the spring door hadn't opened. Well, right now the spring door is wide open, this so-called spring door, where the air is coming from the jet stream directly, pretty much directly across the Pacific. In the case a week ago, though, it was doing a circuitous action that still brought it right across the northwest from Japan. And it was readily apparent. There's no doubt. There wasn't any equivocation about the fact of its existence. Here, people were seeing it and arguing about what it might be. A gentleman sat down and looked at the flow patterns and found out, no, it's not coming from Russia. It's coming from Japan. And I wanted to use this as an example of the same thing that I did when Fukushima went up. It didn't come from there. There was no way that the airflow could come from there, and for probably 6-8 weeks after, if not longer. That year was actually an extended length of time when there was a block. The air did not come here. It went back and back over China, over Russia, back over China, back over Korea, and back over Japan again. So, again, I wanted you to see this. This is a proof, many years later, of an actual volcano. Remember, I told you there was not enough energy in the Fukushima explosion. What little bit of a hydrogen explosion we were told was there, or whatever it was not large enough and not powerful enough to send up the amount of energy into the area of the atmosphere that could actually get up and go anywhere. And this Japanese volcano has been doing this for days now, for a week ago. And been doing it every day. That it does have enough volume, enough energy, and again, you just see the difference. If you're really still interested, or you still feel that somebody has a say on this, if you think that the people that are talking about continually now, I told you it would come forever now. They would just use this thing to beat you down and put you in fear that we're getting hit by this radiation from Fukushima. Folks, it's over. It got trounced. It wasn't enough. Those people over in Japan are having some trouble now, as I told you they would. It would be settling over there. But here we have this week the evidence of what energy it does take to get up in the atmosphere, how long it takes to get here, and that you will have a direct evidence of its occurrence. And I guess that's enough for that. UN finds credible ties between IS and Israel Defense Forces. Another story we've been following behind the woodshed, and it's not much of a tale that we didn't know, but there's more information. Again, as I more think about how to approach our problem for different subject matter areas, you just got to produce a proof. You can put it in a folder, you can put it in an envelope. As I coined it, the bag of reality for certain subject matters. We had started out with the bag of law. You anticipate what law you're going to need wherever you go, and you have that available. Most of it's in your mind, but you have it to show somebody. People need props, so you bring copies of it. And if they say, well, you just got that off the internet, you say, yeah, right off the GPO website, or whatever the authority was that you got it from. Don't worry about that you got it off the internet. That's how we communicate now. But you have the proof for people to see. It's a prop. And the reason why you know it's just a prop, because they could have went before and understood that, but they didn't. And so, it's now coming out. The IDF forces look like they've been involved, as we would know. For those of you that are interested in discussing that, I'm not. Again, I really don't have any purpose to discuss a lot of this. I'm just saying here's proof. This article I found, it goes through quite an extensive connections, and I thought it was valuable because it has lots of links within the discussion, and you can pull yourself together a package of information. That shows that this is where the origins of this is all about, what it's doing. Now, what would you do with that? Well, it may not just be that you talk to people about it. It may be that you actually get yourself all organized and in a summary, consolidated fashion, make a 1 or 2 page statement of what your opinion, what your thought, what your observation your observation's better on the improperness of what's going on, and you send it to somebody. You send to somebody that has sitting in a seated decision. And nowadays with email, and you can do carbon copies and all that, you can send it to a lot of places fast and make it official. You can enter into where you have the right to do coordination, even public comment, and more, because that's what most people will be able to do, is just public comment. That's the last stage of the coordination process. That you would just drop this kind of packet on the government someplace, It's like this vaccine nuttiness that's going on now. They've utilized this measles that everybody used to get, and everything was fine. In fact, they used to, if you were more than one in a family, one kid in a family, a little goat, you had quite a few more. They'd throw all the brothers and sisters together so we all got it at once, and they get that done with, and then it was done. That this measles thing is really kicking off, that you need to have a put together bags of reality. As we talked last week, that the people that are getting the vaccines are actually transmitting the measles, that adulterated GMO form. This is what this information I'm trying to produce here recently. I'm not realizing what this can be used for. This discussion about the Israel being involved with is a bigger story, a bigger development. You can pull that together, and if you want to head off or show up this insanity that's going on, if just nothing else to get it in the public consciousness, you set up your proof to somebody who has a seat of decision. Like I understand in Oregon, they're doing a carbon tax right now. All y'all anywhere, the whole nation. You pull together that the climate change. We just got new records, new information that says that one of the biggest travesties was the statistical anomalies that were created by these people pushing this agenda. This is what's underpinning these things, these so-called sciences, these frauds, as we've identified, are underpinning a carbon tax. And if you don't think that's going to be serious, they're attaching it to motor vehicle gas. So when if the price of oil goes back and the price of gas goes up, all this will be on top. You notice it's all coming, it's like a plan. They drop the price of the gas, all of a sudden now they'll dump a bunch of these taxes on it, and then when it goes back up, it's $2-3 more. And they get you to pay for this fraud. And so if you could just pull your information together, I may or may not have some things on carbon tax today, but I mean, we've had climate change. You go back to the Blogcaster, you find all these proofs of scientific papers and or official discussions that you could pull together as supplements to your summary statement, introducing the problem, declaring the observation, declaring what you want done in face of the fraud, and at least you are now engaged. You should track that and persist. And you give this information to as many people that have a decided decision, so that you just know that they can't get away from it. And if you persist intensely enough, and if it's local to you, you get to look them right in the eye. And I think after a while, this does have an effect on people, and it's probably one of the reasons why I continue and persist each week, just to bring this information along. Now, last week we talked about, very end, last 4 minutes, I talked about the marijuana initiatives and what I thought was the corporate Trojan horse. More and more discussions coming out now. I was following this week, and people are starting to see what I was talking, not because of what I saw. I think they see it independently, but I want to point out this cannabis thing is not a real good deal. There's a lot of concerns. The laws went in a lot quick before anybody analyzed them. No different than an unconstitutional law went in. Even if it's right about the marijuana law, the cannabis so-called legalization, I believe it's criminal. It's incremental criminalization. It looks like to me these, even if they were constitutional before, there's no check. And if these things come back and they cause hardships, it's all presumed to be lawful. So you have to have more in you when you go address it. And for those of you, and I got a lot of response. In one regard, I really do appreciate the response. In the other regard, when I see so many much more important information than dealing with cannabis and not being responded to, it's a mixed blessing to me, I suppose. But one of the things I pointed out to you is that my recent observation, and because I wasn't focused on it, was really that there are people that have been out there, and thanks to the internet that we get to see this, that cannabis has some real medical uses. And the United States government has denied that, just denied it outright, despite the fact I've reported behind the Woodshed on the patents that use the certain constituents about cannabis that work in a medicinal capacity. So there's another lie, and a lot of these, see, the way I look at this is that when they criminalized possession of cannabis, because if you looked very carefully at the law, the permits were over the commerce of it, that they called marijuana. And nobody really stepped up early on to say, wait a minute now, so that means there's a private, non-commercial right, if you will. Our right to use that was always there, that these new marijuana initiatives now permit, legalize, and constrain that use underneath a term called homegrown. Homegrown. I hope you picked up on the first part of that, homegrown, what I've talked to you about that. And they've now limited it down because there's still this underlying idea that it has no actual medical benefits. Remember, they outlawed every extract but one solvent, which was glycerin in the law I looked at. All the other extract solvents were outlawed. And this is over the top of a existing commerce law that never touched private use, but nobody knew to argue that, or didn't. Or if they did, the Bar Association judges just denied it, and nobody pursued it past that. That news story come up here to continue on this a little bit. The United States Surgeon General admits science is real, says weed has medical benefits. No, science is real. Science is just a process, folks. So let's just get beyond that. And it doesn't tell us anything. It just tells us what we think we know. It's our best guess. And cool with that. But I mean, it's okay. Climate is real too, right? I mean, all these things are real. But what are you doing about it? What are you doing with it? Are you using it as a club to beat people, or are you using it as the wonder of us not knowing what the hell it is, and we'll still study for it? But now the United States Surgeon General admits that weed has medical benefits. So this is starting to, for those of you that are into this, and I don't, at some level, like I said, I'm just enthused that people were really responding to that cannibal story last week, that wherever it is you need to step in, I'm asking you to do so. Get practice in stepping in to address these. That when you are into a place where they think that there's no medical benefits, this is another story you can get. Again, the link will be in the blogcaster page. Those of you that listen to the podcast won't get this. You just have to find on Real Liberty Media website, go find the website, the program page for Behind the Woodshed, and then go find the blogcaster page. It's on the left-hand side. And while you're at it, you may want to click on the little Doge of War image and donate to Grimner for his gracious use of his time and to set that up for me and keep us going all this time. And then also worldtruth.org, using the servers, they're gracious enough to let me tie into them, and it's a social network you might want to consider. But here's some more information that it's showing that what we've been told. And the things they're using to destroy us, really the beast of burden, the human resource that they told us that we are, that the code, the United States Federal Code says that we are, is being used against us, and we're now have the information to start pushing back. It's not that I'm really so much into this, but like I told you, to me, cannabis is just a plant. I mean, I don't know it's like any other plant. I'd walk out and try to figure out what is this plant going to do for me or against me, and whether or not it's good for me. But this now is not the one who's been against it, the one who has the Title I no benefit use for medical marijuana. They're lying. And if you're really involved, you're really interested, you should really take some effort to start really pounding the emails, the letters, and just say, what are you people doing? And that lets you into the ability to do other things that you see are just not right. And what I'm saying, just start someplace, and then hopefully you'll have a success for whatever length of time. Like I said, it took my friend quite a long months, many months, and I don't remember, maybe a year, to overcome this oppression that was coming down, this tax oppression that was coming around on quite a few people. And so it may take a while, so get your mind up. But here it is. The Surgeon General admits that weed has medical benefits. Now, right after he said that, they came back in his office, kind of tried to do the shuffle foot. The point is, it's out there. This is now, you can use their own words. This is it's not your opinion. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy. It's not just this idea you dug up on the internet. It's coming from them. It's them. These people that want to use these harms that say that they're protecting you from. We also keeping track of this thing we call the big data industry in the internet, and doing as we've discussed for long weeks. Wanted to let you know. I almost wanted to in fact, I'm getting to the point I don't know how much longer I want to continue on a lot of this. Twitter and Google team up to make searching for tweets easier. Twitter is constantly moving. That's part of an allure of a social network. But sometimes you want to dig up a tweet you saw and, of course, go to the place where you search for everything, Google. Well, I don't search for anything on Google. I use DuckDuckGo or Start Page or whatever else I can find that gives me adequate search information. I try to not use anything Google. And it's a shame because they have some pretty interesting and cool tools, but that's the point. They give you these cool and free tools. In fact, I understand that I think Google Earth or something, or they gave that $400 package. They're giving it away. And my first question was, well, what are you giving up? What are you giving up? What all this information is going through their cloud server? What are you giving up? So now Twitter's going to team up with Google. I want you to know about that. This is big data. This is integration. I'm getting more and more not liking it. Skype, I told you, I got on last night to tell people about Talks. I think it was tox.im for those of you looking. I've had a couple more people sign up to it. I was able to hook onto them pretty easily. The Windows application hooks up really, really simple. I think it's still in an alpha state, so they're still working on some of it. But for chatting, it works really well. It'll do a group chat with your typing. Is really fast. I was really surprised. It's connected, secured, point to point, as I understand it, and encrypted. And it will do video and it will do audio, but I don't think it does group or conversations. I think it's still short of that. But for the most part, if you want to have a more secure connection, check out Talks. And what you would do is they'll give, as soon as you sign, you apply the application. It gives you an ID number, and you send that to someone that you want to hook up to you, and it works on one end. I had somebody from across the pond give me their number. I put it in my Talks, and within minutes we were actually talking. So and it was decent quality at that level. He couldn't last long to talk, but the point was that Talks.im. Windows seemed to work really well. I finally figured out how to get it on the Linux system. I had to slow down, and I don't understand Linux and what it does. Essentially, what the instructions are for putting it in ended up being adding a repository from which the program can be downloaded through my package manager. So when I figured that all out, I now have it on the Linux system as well. And so I'm just trying to tell you, folks, it's Google and Skype and all these people. It's big data. I don't know why more people aren't looking for alternatives and keeping secure. I don't know if I certainly do not appreciate. There's nothing. I don't even know. I don't know what it is I do. I said I don't like it. I don't appreciate it, but I don't know what I don't do about people using excuses to continue in Skype. I don't get that. I don't. Just because other people do it is not. I mean, we can all jump off the bridge too. We can all walk off the cliff, but that's becomes the hyperbolic determinism of the lemming's leap, which we were all supposed, in this independent, situation, this alternative condition of awareness, we were all supposed to be looking and being vigilant to stay away from. But we weren't supposed to suffer the hyperbolic determinism of the lemming's leap. So I guess enough said there. If you can, and if you will, consider TOX. Find it at tox.im. Mark on the Beast at yahoo.com will give me an email. You can give me your number, and I'll stick it in my contact, and it'll hook us up directly, so we can talk. And like I said before, maybe some of you don't really discuss things in a private manner. I talk about stuff that I don't want anybody to know about, because it's not really that it's secret. It's really more that this is I don't know if people appreciate that we are in a war against certain entities, and they are in touch of our communication lines. They have the intelligence, and I don't want them, no matter by accident even, to understand what I tell people are strategies and tactics and underlying principles that help them be effective. I don't want people that we're addressing to know that. So I guess for me, it really is more of a war footing that I've placed this. Once we found out, I wanted to live in my little utopia, that we weren't. Maybe this and maybe that, maybe they're not. Well, they are, and it's now proven. If it wasn't told before Snowden, it certainly was exposed after, for sure, and continuously. So, and I guess enough there. I guess still got my Jitsi account as well. Piss off the NSA. Dump Skype is on Real Liberty Media if you want to go there. and this is really not that I do a lot of talking. This is actually kind of interesting because I don't do that much talking at all on these things. But when we need communications and we need secure, I think that's going to be very important. So in a way, I'm talking a lot here, and I just feel that I just realize I am talking maybe too much, but I'm frustrated with it. I'm frustrated to watch all the people that I know and like, and we talk about being more free and being secure and not having our stuff, messed with. And we're all just sitting there letting that stuff happen to us. And that Twitter story with Google is another encroachment. It's like I already know we are being surveilled, but it's almost as if it was another violation. It's like just a confirmation that you live in a fishbowl. And it's getting to the point where, well, certainly they're going to tell you, but that they're not bashful about doing these things. FCC commissioner blasts Obama for hiding net neutrality plan from American people. In the Internet of Things, I found this story really interesting. Federal Communications Commissioner Ajit Pai recently released a statement on Obama's net neutrality plan, blasting him for hiding it from the American people. Writing of the 332-page plan, I'm disappointed that the plan will not be released publicly. The FCC should be as open and transparent as the Internet itself and post the entire document on its website. Instead, it looks like the FCC will have to pass the president's plan before the American people will be able to find out what's really in it. And wow, doesn't that sound like Obamacare and Pelosi? You have to pass it before we can see what's in it. So, interesting little glitch in the matrix. I don't know, maybe this gentleman doesn't know what transparency means. You look right through their things, what they're doing to you. You can't see them. That's what's transparent. But I found this little glitch in the matrix interesting and telling, and don't know what we can do with it. But I also talked to you about the reality of net neutrality wasn't what we all think it is. And I hope those of you that got a chance to, in the blogcaster, you took the time to get the link and get that in your mind. Again, this is outside of what all I can keep up with in any kind of comprehensive way. I just know I see that things are important. Maybe you'd like to know about it because it is what we're walking into at this point. And they're not getting any kind of statement. Those of us, if we had a shot at this, that we know the plan's there and not having public comment, if we could identify it as some sort of potential within the needs of public comment, if there was a requirement, you could actually force this into public comment. But if we don't, see, they're going to go, that plan's already in the works, isn't it? And I can guarantee you that qualified one did not write that plan. And so these are the insiders working it for you. And it's up to us to step up to stop it. Otherwise, we're going to get, it's really simple, we're going to get what we remain silent on. They'll beat us where we're silent. And I still can't understand how there's so many of us, how that we can be silent on anyone's subject matter. We don't have to be an expert on any one of them. Just each one of us find one that, like I said, the wrong that we need to right. Moving on, more in the radiation situation, something I guess FCC would be involved with as well. The debate is over. Researchers conclude wireless radiation causes cancer after latest scientific findings were announced. The National Advocacy Group calls for a major child's health organization to promote safe technology in schools with the Turn It Off for Kids initiative. The National Association of Children and Safe Technologies, NACST, is taking action after two recently published studies indicate there is sufficient evidence demonstrating exposure to wireless radiation, also known as RF-EMF, causes cancer. Wireless routers and devices such as tablets, laptops, baby monitors, and cell phones all emit this type of radiation. NACST is calling on Children's Health and Cancer Prevention Organization to make the issues of children's health and exposure to wireless radiation in educational settings an immediate priority for 2015. Now, that said, the science may be there to tell us we have problems behind the woodshed. I've talked about it. We've mentioned it. again, I don't harp on any one thing, and we just kind of touch base as it comes along. I want you to know, if you can, you want to isolate yourself from here. There's a whole lot more than just cancer going on as well. And I can tell you, behind the woodshed, for as behind the woodshed as we are, I've got a lot of radiated technology going on around me most of the time. And so I suppose my days are numbered just by doing this. At any rate, the one thing I do like is the notice, and that there was science findings, and we have to investigate those scientific findings. Remember, science is fraud. So we have to become the scientists, if you will, and analyze whether or not we have to become the peer scientists in order to review the peer science to verify what is the truth in these. But I'll go with this one because I'd rather err on the side of caution in this regard. They want to talk about the precautionary principle, but they never apply it where we need to, like in pharma and GMOs or wireless technology or smart this and smart that, which is all that you find out is not so intelligent generally. That this is important, except I noticed that they also have this call for children. Remember, children is UN. They want to make sure it's always for the children. And now this has a different flavor to it. So we've got to be able to parse out what we need to know from what is being rushed. It comes in the groundswell. It comes in the eddy of the emotion to protect our children. And there's an initiative coming up, and they want you to get involved. So I'm asking you, I think it's important to understand this. Whether or not you want to get in the initiative and get involved on some type of petition thing, I don't really know. But if there's my view on this is if there's science confirming a danger, you certainly need to take heed. This just confirms what we've talked about behind the woodshed for quite a while. Something else that's been thrown on its head that it's really counter-government, anti-propaganda, what the government propaganda is. And I see lots of ideas about the word propaganda as a neutral term. I guess you could go there, but you know, and it has changed recently. And the word propaganda, though, just remember, it is maybe neutral, but it is judged by the one who's using it. So at that point, it's not neutral no more. And we've had talk about the vaccines. I think they're a mortal danger to people. If not a mortal danger, they're a health danger, despite the propaganda of the government to push it through on unproven theories of herd immunity. You just start thinking about this, and it just doesn't flesh out. It's just an ill-conceived theory to begin with, no different than a lot of them. But there was somebody, and I don't know too much about it, I'll just pass this on. A British court came out with somebody who was vilified over his views about vaccines, and he stated that vaccines cause autism. It was Andrew Wakefield. And a British court threw out his conviction against that, the saying that he had fraudulently asserted that. It completely exonerates him. In a stunning reversal, world-renowned pediatric gastroenterologist Professor John Walker Smith won his appeal against the United Kingdom's General Medical Council Regulatory Board that had ruled about him and Andrew Wakefield for their roles in the 1998 Lancet MMR paper, which raised the questions about the link to autism. This is what we were talking about. This MMR measles vaccine was last week as well. The complete victory means that Walker Smith has been returned to the status of full licensed physician in the UK, although he had already retired in 2001, 6 years before the GMC trial ever began. The point is, here, a court finds that the process of the court was incorrect to find a conviction that vilified a gentleman two gentlemen that said that these vaccines can cause autism. Big deal here. I don't know. I know there's more people that talk even more about this that probably could tell you how big it is. It struck me as being really big, and all the information out there is how discredited Wakefield was and has been and vilified and continued to be, and his convictions now thrown out. So for those of you making questions about vaccines, I wanted you to hear about this. This is more information for those of you that heard the MMR, the measles vaccine, the measles being spread by people who haven't gotten it. Listen, how are you, the 1 to 10% of the population that's not vaccinated, causing the epidemic that's going on when we found out last week, the science is in, that you will pass, you are transmitting the GMO altered virus called measles after you get the vaccine? How is the small number in the so-called herd actually causing any force and effect on the larger one? How, if you're vaccinated, is the small 1 to 10% causing any trouble to the majority of the herd? That you're going to now come up in the way this is like shooting a Jordanian, burning a Jordanian flight officer in a cage. This is the same kind of thing. How are you getting all these? How can you justify as a people getting together to denounce those that don't want to get these vaccines that are now proven to cause problems? Autism now for sure, and also now can be transmitting the GMO altered measles. How do you rise up? How do you, as someone who is like in Mississippi, they've taken away all exemptions. How do you justify that underneath a cover that says you just don't you the people just aren't educated enough? These people are criminals. And so those of you in Mississippi need to take this story and need to take the British court and need to go show the last evidence I produced in the Blogcaster last week about the transmission by people who are vaccinated of the measles. You need to take that over there to that woman in Mississippi, that representative, and show her, I think you're the one that's a criminal. Forcing people to you force them not to have a choice, and you force them into something that actually hurts them. This is a felony at least. And we don't say anything about it. Well, we don't say anything about this. And yet I come week after week to produce the proof for those of you that are interested that you can stop a lot of this rush to destroy any choice that you might have. Now, one of the things I found interesting in this issue is, as we're moving in to some of these vaccine things, they still are limiting, and that's why they're attacking homeschooling. They still are limiting they can't hit you quite yet if you still homeschool your sons and daughters. Now, let me get back to the word home as I said that. I went in the marijuana, the cannabis. Remember they styled a term in the bill, homegrown. Remember I told you about the home being your principal place of business, your principal corporate home. It's your tax home. And so I found very interesting that what I found to be a corporate-styled law would have corporate-styled terms and consistent with the IRS when they use the word home. Why didn't they use private grown? And this is where you can step up if you start seeing this distinction. They've actually not even talking about private grown. They're talking about corporate grown, legal entity grown, but not to a certain level. That's what they've criminalized or incrementally criminalized. And the same thing with homeschooling. You'll notice they're getting some tangible grip anymore because they call it homeschooling. So we got to remove some of these words from our discussion about what we do as people privately versus what the system has jurisdiction over or invents terms around. And I just tell you, in practice, this is really knocking the stuffings out of them, big time. When we can delineate our condition separate and distinct from their known or stated authority, and I don't mean as a semantic, I mean supported in substantial form, the authority diminishes rapidly over a lot of this. Now, they come in as a police power, your health and safety, they come in, that's how the government's doing this. The Supreme Court's given a lot of leeway for the government to do this. But that's defeated where you say, well, once you have 90% of the population snookered into taking the vaccine, and now you have how do you have a continuing pandemic, unless I told you it's created, over the vaccinated people? And if you have 90% vaccinated, then it's not the ones that are not vaccinated. And so your imposition of a police power that you claim is the demonstrable exigence that allows you to use that police power is a fraud. So if we have this in our mouth as we address these points, you have a better statement than just cowering in the corner. Vaccine, and this is where we're coming to, is this imposition now. They're using this simple little measles outbreak. Actually, now we find out the vaccinated ones are the ones that are causing it, to try and take away your right, more importantly, your right of choice. And I'm on record to say I'm not totally against all vaccines, but I'm certainly not liking the most recent ones that have been invented, and I'm certainly not as to the scheduling of them. And even so, the more I read, the more I'm finding out a lot of these really aren't any good. But that's me. You have to decide for yourself. Vaccine McCarthyism. What if the vaccine paradigm itself is deliberately flawed? This is talked about by Dr. Gary Null and Richard Gale, an article. This is critical to understanding how we're duped. This is critical to understanding how you cut through this. You put the question out. I see people talking on the internet, you need to do this officially or more formally. You need to go down to Mississippi, the one woman in Mississippi, and say, what if your paradigm is flawed? And here's some evidence that says it probably is. And you're claiming that criminals need to be put in jail because they don't want to subject themselves to this misery and the threat, and don't want to become a vector themselves. This is a severe indication that maybe you're mentally incapacitated. Within the mainstream medical and scientific community, there is an unassailable pseudo-truth that vaccines are safe and effective, whether administered individually or in combination. Within the vaccine-injured children and autism movements, there is also an unchallenged belief that vaccines are effective but not always safe. In this case, vaccine-injured children or adult family members were simply one of the rare cases where they received a hot lot vaccine or possessed biomolecular abnormalities, such as a mitochondrial dysfunction, and suffered the consequences. Even many parents with 2 children developing neurological complications after vaccines will continue to follow the recommended vaccine schedule. Remember Tyler's father. He followed the recommended experts say, and his son dies. Do you want to be him? How about someone want to put their self on the line? That Mississippi representative, how about if she put her life on the line? Something happens to if I'm forced to do a vaccine, and if it kills my son or daughter, she dies. If it maims him, she has to pay for his care. How about we do that? Why? Let's say, well, but congressmen, these representatives, they're immune when they're in Congress. Not to do fraud, folks. Not to do crime. Remember, the theft by extortion is doing actions that you don't have a right to do under color of that authority. That's a felony. When you start putting this together, I think we have a better word in our mouth to address some of these things ahead of time. And when they don't want to put themselves on the line, when you point out the government has underwritten immunity to these the purveyors of death, I think we have to slow that bus up a bit. At least give yourself a place to argue. Put it into, at least as we understand now, the administrative condition. Make a discussion. As long as it's in that condition, they have hardly, I don't think there's much of anything they can say while you're in administrative negotiation. Any medical physician, scientist, nurse, public health advocate, politician, or journalist who question the myth of vaccine safety and efficacy are often immediately attacked, ridiculed, and designated a conspirator. Remember the fingers pointing, right? You've got 3 pointing back. That allows you to know who you're dealing with. And if you have a better source of facts, and you show that you're not ignorant like they want to claim, they initially claim you don't know, you're just not smart enough. Yeah, well, I might not be smart enough, but I'm pretty intelligent, and here's some information of people that are more intelligent than me. And it says you are wrong, and therefore you, under your color of authority to force me to do anything, is a felony. That, in fact, the pro-vaccine propaganda machine sets forth articulate doctors and university scientists to engage in ad hominem personal attacks against vaccine dissenters. However, what if all these individuals and organizations are shadow lobbying foundations and their think tanks are wrong? What if vaccine paradigm is flawed? What if vaccines have never been soundly confirmed to be safe and effective? What if CDC, vaccine manufacturers, and the leading vaccine advocates knew of these discrepancies and contradictions, yet intentionally ignored them against the public interest and well-being of the American population? After several decades of studying the scientific literature regarding vaccines, following the money trails, and intervening many dozens of toxicologists, immunologists, research physicians, pediatricians, and medical journalists, the vaccine paradigm can now be accurately deconstructed with real independent science. This year, the year 2014, has been a particularly dismal year for pro-vaccine movement. We are presenting the science that has unfolded during the past 12 months as indicative of a collapse in the modern vaccine paradigm. There's a lot more to read. I wanted to say just that first paragraph this actually the second paragraph in what I read, gives you the list of how you address somebody. It's after every comma is the next thing you bring as a list in a short form, a list or a short form addendum to your summary statement that you would present to someone in your bag of reality of how these people are moving against you or the ones you love. Incorrectly giving the notice that says they now know what they're doing is a crime. They now know that at least it's not so settled. What's more settled is that they may be criminals and have been. And so what I saw in that first list is the way he laid this article out, the way it's written, is your list. You put these, every comma, he reads a thing after the questions, you start reading about what about, after several decades of studying the scientific literature regarding vaccines, comma, that's number 1. Number 2 is following the money trail. Number 3 is interviewing many toxicologists. Number 4 is immunologists. Number 5 is research physicians. Number 6 is pediatricians and medical journalists. Number 7, that's what you list on a piece of paper, and then you get a proof, a short proof of someone. You find these same proofs that they're talking about in your packet of addressing the problem against someone who is in a false paradigm, and your whole point is you're challenging the paradigm they're asserting, where they steal your right of choice and self-determination underneath an oath they took that was supposed to protect it. I'm trying to lay out a more methodological approach and presentation for you all. This is on vaccines, but it could be anything. As I said earlier, the the carbon tax that's going into states. California already has theirs. You can defeat that just by going in and so that's a fraud. It takes a lot more work. It might take a few more people, but I think we have the people. Instead of just talking about this stuff and whining about it amongst each other and having more seminars about how bad we're being treated, if we just organize those same people to do a concerted attack and until it was done, this stuff is done, folks. It's really that simple. And in my referencing the Mississippi vaccination leader stands by itself, strict rules. Mississippi is the vaccination leader that stands by itself by the fact that they've taken away all exceptions. There was another state, I think, that did this, that you will not have a reason, you have no reason sufficient to take and say you want an exemption from being submitted to this extortion. The Mississippi State epidemiologist Dr. Thomas E. Dobbs III stood in a crowded room at the state capitol this week and waited for a legislative verdict on the law that fostered what he regards as a public triumph in a place that has few of them, the country's highest immunization rate among kindergarten students. But in the recent weeks, the nearly unbending nature of Mississippi's law requiring students to be vaccinated has been in jeopardy, with 24 lawmakers publicly supporting an exemption for conscientious beliefs. The debate coming as other states grappled with the measles outbreak. So here's your non-issue issue. This is your Jordanian pilot being burned, causing a furor. We're going to attack it now. People just running running over the cliff on this. They've identified here for you. This is the only reason they're moving forward on this, is something that's a non-issue, actually. And now we find out that these MMR vaccines are causing transmission, and they themselves cause harm. Apparently it's not being part of the discussion that you could bring. And it says it's going to all the states. So to me, that's notice that y'all who are interested better start looking at your legislatures to start giving a better, more balanced, informed discussion to go on. Grapple with the measles outbreak turned Mississippi into one more battleground between medical experts. Experts say, "Oh, we didn't expect that. It's not conforming to how we designed reality." Remember, that's the phyla Rosetta conversation. Oh, it's just not cooperating. This comet's just not cooperating with us. Experts say, who champion vaccinations and parents who fear the government's role in medical decision-making. We have been a victim of our success, and people don't realize how bad these diseases are, Dr. Dobbs said in an interview before lawmakers met on Tuesday to consider a bill that would have expanded exceptions to the vaccine requirement. Quote, "But by and large, I think there's an increasing understanding of how important it is to maintain our invaluable defense against unnecessary illnesses." Well, if you know that's what he's going to say, you know all the proof to show, we do it behind a woodshed, to show that that's not an accurate representation of the facts, that there's another way to look at it. Now, I'm not saying that these things aren't dangerous, these diseases, and I'm not saying that maybe vaccines could work. What I'm saying is that this wholesale denial of your choice is the biggest threat you're looking at. And these guys, these experts, say they come up with these decisions that sound plausible. In fact, they're not supported by anything. This guy can't support the fact of transmission by any vector. They can't even identify what it really is. What they do is they do things that appear next to, it's like related to the transmission. So Mississippi's on the forefront of this. Well, if they're on the forefront of it, why is it still in that state? Why is it even a problem that they're even discussing this? So there's your anomaly, and you can bore in on it. I won't go on. There's a lot more to read. I could read, I'll be here reading forever. I'm trying to point out how you read these things give you force and effect and power when you go make these discussions. Today, right now, we're talking about vaccines. This could be on any subject matter area. Whether it's vaccines, whether it's carbon tax, whether it's climate change, whether it's any property tax, whether it's the establishment of a pollution control district. Some parasites want to figure out a way to suck off a lot more people and do nothing. It's all administrative bureaucracy. It doesn't matter. It's the method that I'm trying to explain to you. You take a list of things that are the objects that they use as a statement to try and support it, and you go to the law initially and you find out how everything that they've done is not valid to start with, let alone not reasonable, let alone the harm it would cause. And you make that list. You get your proof. These are really essentially, if you went to school, you were told to do a book report. These are essentially book reports on a particular subject matter that in this case, you choose because you're passionate about that. How vaccine hysteria could spark totalitarian nightmare. The very point of what I'm talking about taking away your freedom of choice. Interestingly, again, politicos are involved. They seem to be the center of our universe. But in this case, Governor Chris Christie has been vilified for making a very simple statement that parents, and presumably patients themselves, should have the freedom to choose whether to vaccinate their children. And I have asked for years what I thought about, I have been asked for years what I have thought about vaccination, so let me lay out the issues as written by Dr. Lee Hayeb. Before getting into the science, let's discuss the philosophy. And she lays out a number of points. Here's another list of things of philosophy that is laid out before you, before the government, before the politicians, who I will tell you have an opinion, but they absolutely, probably, and most likely, and most 9 times out of 10, I can't be absolute, but 9 times out of 10, they don't know what the heck they're looking at. They're just people like you and me who just got in a position that, even if in their most best-hearted sense, that want to help out and didn't realize it was as corrupt as it was, didn't realize what they're being told is a bunch of nonsense, and they just go because they got 5,000 bills or 4,000 bills or 2,000 bills to go through in a few months. They just kind of go skip along the surface. And along the way, they got a couple pet peeves they don't want to see go through, and the rest of it flies right through. That you have to be there to be the voice to counter this nonsense, this governmental parasitic control. So she lets you know in a list the philosophies that are out there to deal with as a doctor. So this has some force and effect if you were to present it that way. She goes and tells you her opinion. I'll let you read. Hopefully you have interest in these things. I guess the point for me is that this is even, you don't even have to like vaccines to want to know about personal choice, private choice, and how the government doesn't have the right to interfere. That's a property in you that's being extorted out of, where they can't actually demonstrate an exigence that's not colored by another colorful discussion, fraud or whatever, that you need to kind of see the table, how this table is set, so you know what things to pick up and what to put down. Again, these vaccines are killing us, and they're now addressing and taking another private right that we had. And this is where I found them to be important, why I just wanted to talk and kind of mention to you about them. The day is coming when the one with the color of authority will have the right. They have the right of execution. And we saw that very unlikely that the juries are going to protect you. Now, that said, there was a gentleman we talked about behind Woodshed that shot some SWAT team people coming in the middle of the night without a knock. Had a warrant. They even had a warrant. Didn't knock. He's protecting his girlfriend. They came in over some marijuana. How ludicrous this becomes. But he shoots and kills an officer, and that jury down there didn't get him for killing the cop because they didn't knock, even though they had a search warrant. So there's these various places we can get some hope that maybe a jury will see that. He still got hit for a felony for having a gun while he had marijuana. The stupidity behind all that. And it was on a warrant that wasn't actually, he didn't have anything near what they had put in the warrant to get the warrant. But again, the Supreme Court's just saying that you live in a prison and they have access to your cell. You call it your house. It's your prison. It's your pod. Your neighborhood's your pod, and then your cell is your house. And they have a right to go in there at any time. Well, in this case, you also have a right to bear arms, so they have to expect that, as I've been telling you, and you have the right underneath your belief of what's going on to I guess, kill them in this one place. I wouldn't do this anywhere else, but this is the intangible, and this is what we can't rely on. So John Greer, as we move on here, the executioners in the military in uniform. See, it's as I said, we live under the military rule. I've explained how that is, and it went one step beyond that. When we got the memo over the NDA, they said they even got rid of the Lieber Code, and they went extrajudicial. This now is a very serious problem, beyond serious. This should terrify people. And here's another story of how this will work out for you. If you think that you're going to talk to them in the street, or you think you're going to go riot in the street or whatever to do something, as I was telling you last week, you have to look at their policies. The Supreme Court's come down on a number of cases that their piece of paper that's on writing is more important than your life. That the monkeys they send out, the jackbooted thugs that they send out to enforce the law, have the right of execution, need to be guided literally by the word in their policies. Otherwise, they're justified if they follow that, and it's not there. That John Greer shooting. I don't want to die today. Unarmed dad of 2 pleads. Officer kills him anyway. Officer kills him anyway. Got his hands up, folks. Got a link, you got a video, you can check it out yourself. John Greer, 46-year-old dad of 2, told police officers, "I don't want to die today," before one cop shot him once in the chest. Greer, according to other officers on the scene, as well as Greer's own father, who witnessed the police killing his son, had his hands up when a Fairfax County, Virginia officer, Adam Torres, fired at him from about 15 feet away. As Greer stood in the doorway of his own home, newly released documents show. After the bullet struck him in the chest, Greer took a step back into his townhouse, closed the door, and collapsed to the floor. There he bled to death as police waited nearly an hour before calling medical assistance. And so here's another point that I noticed. You have to go down to all your police agencies. Folks, there's got to be someone in the sound of my voice, or someone that knows someone in the sound of my voice, to start doing this stuff. And you go in and you look at their policy over what happens when you shoot somebody, and you make sure that you put in the policy, if it's not any there, that they will immediately give immediate medical assistance. And if not, you put in there's a penalty, and you decide what you negotiate what that penalty is. You get that in writing in their police policies. Otherwise, you're going to be one day maybe being Mr. Greer. Instead, police called a SWAT team. Instead of giving medical assistance, police called a SWAT team, which smashed in the door of Greer's home with a military-style armored truck. That when SWAT officers stormed into the house, Greer was dead. Torres can be heard telling the investigators the following audio recording. "I meant to pull the trigger. It's not accidental. I don't feel sorry for shooting the guy at all." Greer was not accused of any crime, and had no reported criminal record. He was said to be upset with Maura Harrington, his domestic partner of 24 years, who is also the mother of his 2 children, had informed him that she was ending their relationship, but he was speaking calmly to police before he was shot. Domestic partner, folks. Do you understand how they do this to us? You know what a domestic partner? That's a legal entity. You're getting all your civil rights. Mr. Greer enjoyed all his civil rights. It was the right to pay exactions of every kind and no other. So, I just want to keep, maybe harp on this. I'm a harpy, I guess. They're getting their rights because they're you can be too smart to be a cop. It has to be written down for them. Luckily, they're smart enough to read, I guess. I guess we have one saving grace yet. That these cops have to be literate enough to read the policy manual. That policy manual is your life or death. And I don't know what else more to say more powerful than that, being that that's our life and death. That we need to go down and make sure all these things and more, way more than I've even mentioned. I mean, I'm not as imaginative as we need to be of all the things that they're going to deal with, that they will give themselves the license to kill you. Domestic partner. Okay, it's a legal entity. I guess they get to, since it's a legal entity and not real, they get to shoot the man with his hands up in the doorway of his own home. See, that doesn't even hold up, does it? But that's what they're doing. So, another point of advocacy to get you all down to your local police force and read their policy manual and say, okay, this is where we're going to need protection. This is where we're going to need protection. This is what you have to tell your officers, and you end up making that thing a Bible, maybe more. And they end up having to learn what that's about, and it'll take them a long time, and maybe they'll be learning that so much that they won't be out killing people either. But you're going to have to now delineate every little stinking thing to these people so that if you get killed, your family can go and say, listen, they violated this rule, this policy. The other thing is when they get the policy is so stringent, maybe only the dumbest of them will be even able to get a job, because the rest of them will say, I'm not going to learn all this. In fact, I've heard that from ex-cops. No, I'm not going to go back into that. There's too much liability. See, that folks, they tell you, they know they're sitting liable. They're in the discretionary position. That discretion cannot transgress these policies or the law. And so apparently their policy guides even the law, if you understand that problem. That I'm asking you to consider as one object lesson, that this become an object lesson for you to take seriously, that these policies they operate under are insufficient to keep them from coming to execute you. However legitimate they were at the door, or out in the street, actually, when they shot him from him. I don't know that any man has a right to die in this situation. And it's coming down, even more importantly, to they're expanding now from the Patriot Act, making any misdemeanor actionable underneath the Patriot Act. They criminalize now that part. Now we come 10 years later, 11 years later, New York Police Department has a plan to magically turn anyone it wants into a felon. Remember, I was trying to tell you, they get you into the misdemeanor, they can take all your information. Now, we heard that last week. There's no protection unless you kind of listen to what I said about having a word in your mouth about whether or not, and challenging their two standards, probable cause, and whether or not it was a serious enough offense. The Supreme Court says that they have to follow that much. That now New York the Police Department just wants to make, suggested that they make legislation to make certain acts felonies so that they can throw on the massive amount of state power. And when they go to felony, they can shoot you. They don't even really need a reason. When it goes to felony, even a felony trying to run away gets shot. I mean, if you didn't think about that, if they had a second thought when you weren't, there is no second thought if you're considered a felon. On Wednesday, New York Police Department Commissioner Bill Bratton urged state legislators to consider increasing the penalty for resisting arrest from a misdemeanor to a felony. The change, he argued, would help New Yorkers get around the idea that you can resist arrest. You can't. It would also give cops an easy way to turn victims of their own worst impulses into the worst class of criminal. Now, the other problem is, how do you resist arrest on what they say you are doing when they haven't really charged a crime? And so here's a bad thing they're going to be doing. Those of you in New York, you really need to step up and make your voice known about this. Do some study. I haven't done any more study on it. It just hit too quickly to even look at this. But see, they're getting the ability to just execute upon what they need in the moment. And the legislature's giving it to them. So that should tell you that it's not representing your interests. In theory, a resisting arrest charge allows the state to further punish suspects who endanger the safety of police officers as they are being apprehended. In practice, it gives a tautological justification to cops who enjoy roughing people up. Why did you use force against the suspect, officer? Because she was resisting arrest. How do I know you're telling the truth? Because I charged her with it, sir. So, this is the stuff that's coming down. There's no holds barred now, folks. There's no real restriction. The only restriction that they might have is you not being a cricket. Your silence is killing you, essentially. They come and they offer this to the legislature. The legislature is going to go with that. There's no restriction. More proof that your house is your cell in the pod called your neighborhood. Who comes to fix your broadband? It may be the FBI in disguise, without a search warrant. And that's okay with the courts, if it's declared later on. So here we have a continuing idea that the courts have now allowed justification after the fact. We don't need a judiciary. We went extrajudicial. Now they can do it all. Underneath, I think it was. I don't remember now which one it was. It might have been the Patriot Act, but it might have been an act right after that, where they gave the FBI carte blanche to write their own search warrants. People should have cried out for that, but we don't. A Nevada court has ruled FBI agents can dress up as an ISP repairman to blag their way into a suspect's home without a search warrant, but must tell the court about it when they do. The ruling stems from a case brought by the feds against a Malaysian poker player, Wai Sang Fua, I guess it's PH, Fua, and his son, whom the agency accused of running an illegal betting syndicate from a luxury Las Vegas villa, for those of you that don't do the double L too well, during last year's FIFA World Cup. The duo hired the house in the grounds as Caesars Palace Casino on the famous Strip and asked for large screen monitors, laptops, and extra internet broadband lines to be installed for the duration of their stay. This raised suspicion among the staff, and the FBI were called in. The feds couldn't get a search warrant based on the information they had, so hatched a cunning plan to get inside the property. With the hotel's connivance, they cut internet access to the villa, then posed as repairman to supposedly fix the problem and get a look inside. To do this, the two-man team enlisted the ISP's technical support worker, who told them the lingo to use to sound convincing and what equipment to check. After the visit, the FBI successfully applied for a search warrant in a court and raided the villa and two others at the casino. They claim they discovered evidence that an illegal World Cup betting operation was being run from the rooms. But United States Magistrate Judge Peggy Aline has thrown out the evidence against Wei Sing Fui and his son. Judge Lee ruled the phony repairman ruse was an acceptable tactic to gain access to the suspect's property without getting a warrant. The problem is the FBI didn't tell the judge who issued the warrant that they had done so. So the warrant was invalid. So you figure out this logic. You really do need to figure this logic. There's a link here. You can get the judgment. You can read it. I don't have the time to expand over into this. It just told me that you're going to have to learn how to fix your own internet, apparently. See what they're doing? You can't. They have access to you. You don't have access to even keep your life normal without being susceptible to interference. And so you keep talking on the internet and you keep building your big data file. And they do what they did to those people in Philadelphia, New York, about the woman looking for a pressure cooker for her rice and the husband looking for a backpack and the son just interested in the Boston bombing. and all of a sudden up pops somebody at your doorstep. Only they do this over time, and the day that you need to get something on the public utilities fixed, that request goes to the FBI. The FBI downloads your file, quickly anticipates whether or not they got anything they want to go look at you for. They send in at least maybe one with a normal technician, and they look around. And you are protected against that. Pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. Kind of a country you live in. How do you call it free? How do you wave the flag, folks? How do you support the heroes that go fight for your freedom? How do you continue to justify that we won't let them turn us into something that we aren't? They hate us for our freedom, and then we will fight that when you don't have a bit of it. That all said, you still have a say. You have a little bit to fight back, as I've been trying to argue. I think more people that started fighting back we'd have a bigger outcome. See, this is all one-sided government imposition in the courts. Now, somehow that last case, there was a dividing line. Why it divided on them not telling how they got the information, it seems to be completely contrary to the Fourth Amendment, once they identified there was no reasonable cause. But this is where the line has been drawn. And it gets back to they start learning the proper words to say. And if they just use these magic words, they get what they want. And this happens because the government has got all the power and the attorneys to pay for getting their way. And it sits as a real party and interest behind the scenes. It's actually doing an equitable violation. It's not supposed to hear its own cause. You understand, folks? You got to put this forward. And so they win the day because we are silent. We don't even know to. And honestly, you have other things to do, right? You have other things to do than work to maintain a lifestyle that reflects freedom. You're just too busy, right? But some people get really upset, and they figure out a way after their violation. And this is the other crime. We can only do this after. Well, for the most part, we can only do it after the violation. But here's someone who fights back. Man held 20 hours after asking to file TSA complaint. He files a suit. The traveler detained for more than 20 hours after a search of energy bars and a sports watch in his carry-on bag at the airport has sued the Transportation Security Administration and accused the TSA supervisor of lying. For those of you that understand that they're now I understand that by February the government may or may not fund Department of Homeland Security. This would be one of the stories that you want to bring forward to say that the TSA is doing nothing but harassing people and causing their own trouble. They have become the terrorists, and you shouldn't fund the DHS. The war on terror was a stateless war. It was impossible in law, and it's defeated us in every manner of way since the Patriot Act at least. Now NDAA, that they have not done one thing. TSA has not found one terrorist at all, ever. Despite all the money dumped in and all the harassment and hassle and crime that goes on around that color of authority excuse. Architect and runner Roger Vanderlook said he was arrested after asking TSA workers how to file a complaint. He said he spent nearly a day in a holding cell without being questioned by police or given the chance to call his wife, who was frantic. 2 violations. It's difficult to lose control of it's difficult to lose control of your existence. That's what it amounts to. I was absolutely terrified. So, it's up to us, folks. He's not going to remain silent. We'll be interested to see where they go. They may actually, depending on how they reviewed this, it may actually settle out of court. Doesn't matter. The point is he's going to fight it. But I was telling you before, as soon as you get engaged with this, if you plan in the future to have to go through the TSA, and that would now include most everybody, any public transportation now may be susceptible, you ought to get in the administrative side so that you get ahead of this. And you create a record of their non-ability to do so. In the meantime, you take this information and you go to every representative that wants to support the DHS in Congress, that wants to appropriate the money. See, the congressmen are the criminals. They're the accessories to this crime against us. And you explain how you build a dossier of information to show all the facts and how they aren't what is being used to justify it, and contrary, and the harm it's doing. And you tell them to shut the money stream off. You say, well, that's not, no one's going to listen. I don't know, folks. I had just have evidence this week that one man doing something did have a difference. He came formally and presented accurately and on point, and only on point, those things he needed to do to defeat a whole group of people. Remember, the standard operating procedure is what we were told that you can address right now if you're going to go through their systems. But you see here the evidence they're willing to lie. They're willing to, it was a false abduction, false arrest, constraint on your liberty, all because you want to file a complaint. These are major violations and crimes that we could push back on and end this thing. As I was talking about the DHS shutdown, I thought I didn't put the link, but here it is. DHA shutdown grows more likely. I didn't even know about this until this little report here. The chances, so I think it's kind of neat. Let's go after it. There's got to be a few hundred of you that don't like what DHS is doing, that you can become part of the voice against it, and properly so, not just an opinion and not just railing about, not just ranting, but actually lay it out, figure it out, lay it out. I do enough reports, even just touching it once a week. Here behind the Woodshed, to give you enough evidence in the reports coming from the government itself to show that there's evidence of its wastefulness, its misappropriation of funds, its lack of existence, justification for its existence, the fraud that it is, the fraud that underpins it. The chances of a shutdown in the Department of Homeland Security are growing by the day, with the congressional leaders at a stalemate over legislation that would provide funding after February 27th. February 27th. You have a couple weeks. Get on it. This is it. This is the notice. This is telling you. This is your public comment time. DHS Secretary Jay Johnson has warned that a lapse of funding would cause a terrible disruption, while White House officials have accused congressional Republicans of putting national security at risk. Well, remember, folks, if you want to believe that the Republicans are anything for freedom or property and all that, this is the time to test them. There is no excuse to stop the appropriations bill for DHS right now. The Republicans have the power. This is not even a close fight. That anybody in the Republican is going to support this underneath a fraud called a war on terror and national security, you know that they're just a criminal. This is your opportunity. You have a couple of weeks to put something together, a week or so to put something together, and voice your observations. Put the heat on these people. When Ron Paul was running, and I was in broadcasting early on, and Ron Paul was running, we saw a lot more tangible response when a bunch of people got together, and they didn't get together. They just mass discussion a mass conversation going to the Congress, flooding, burning the phones up, the email wires, shutting them down, getting reports back that we'd done that. I don't hear too much of that anymore, but this is the mechanism we have to reinvigorate. For this shutdown, or this this failure to appropriate funds, this is a real crucial. This is the strong arm that afflicts us. This should, in some people that are listening to me, or those that you know, should get you throw off a lot of lesser items, and you can focus on this. You could be the one or two that really advances this whole thing. Just shut it down. Republicans are using the funding measure to leverage to try to roll back the president's executive actions on immigration. This should be mutually exclusive of anything, folks. Why are they playing games? If they're able to play games, they're not serious about this, and you need to inform them they ought to be. You don't play games with the lack of freedom that I hate using that word freedom, but I don't know what to say. It's our language. Of the lack of a way of life that's been interfered with by this fraud called the war on terror. The thing that the government created, the thing it's used to go extrajudicial. That alone should be enough that you put pressure on them to start doing more proper, instead of using it as dice. Is you being free dice, folks? Is you being executed on the street because there's all these impositions coming down that the states take license from to kill you? Is that dice? Is that throwing the dice? It's throwing the dice on your end, because you don't know from one minute to the next if you're going to be executed. But on their end, this is a felony. This is a treason. So, February 27th, you got to have your stuff well in about a week or so before that and make your phone calls if you will. This is a chance. I see this as opportunity. As I told you, I wish I could be in lots of places, lots of ways. Because it's this is notice of opportunities to respond, and I've been hearing crickets for the most part. And I after a time, you can't deny that. You can't deny that the crickets we are winning. They're winning, and that's the loss. Our silence is what they use against us. So I found an article in the paper or along the lines. It says, "I trained to be a police officer. Feature what it's like to be in a use of force simulator." And I thought this was a very interesting article that I will give you in the a link to. I can give you a post-production broadcast that gives you someone who is a journalist that went into to a simulator, use of force simulator on a shooting simulator that the cops go through. And I found the article to be pretty interesting. It gets you into a certain mindset. It shows you that the job is really not so easy, for as much as it's easy to say, you can make that decision not to pull the trigger. There are lots of instances that police get involved in that really are questionable. And this simulator attests for that. And so this is a journalist who went through the test. I thought it was an interesting insight. And I think we have to have this insight as we approach the problem of writing police policy, which so we have an understanding of where there has to be that line. So when you say, listen, you can only go this far and no further, you've gone up to the line and no further. That is the place that is the reasonable place to stop, because these people have to be able to defend themselves. What we're looking for is when it's not just execution because I say so and I won't, like the cop says, I don't regret a bit of it. No, that's not good enough. No, there's got to be a better decision to be made. Looking this thing over again, I get this is no purpose to read it. You have to read it for yourself. You have to see what they're writing. I could paraphrase it. It won't be as informative as someone reading it. The bottom line is, I felt this is important. If we're looking at policy changes for these agencies, you need to understand you need to understand the demands of the job. If you haven't been a cop, we used to take these. It used to be something they used to go. I can't remember, ride along or something. That was pretty informative. You never really got. I don't know, met too many people that got into anything that really saw it, but you did see the side of the cops. It really is not so easy at times, and we need to be cognizant of that. As we see also in the same week article, these 5 states have a great plan to combat police brutality. I think this is all in the same context of figuring out what's going on. The states are now trying to take it on. That's also besides going to police policy, you go to and you have the states decide how in law, in code, how that's going to be done, and then you don't have to worry about it from precinct or sheriff to sheriff, or precinct to precinct, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, political subdivision from political subdivision. It's covered as a blanket. The latter half of 2014 was defined by a new and widespread recognition of the problem of police brutality in America. It's more like policing brutality, because it's really the military force that's on us. The issue was catapulted to the national attention in the wake of the deaths of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Tamir Rice, and as well as excessively aggressive police response to protesters in Ferguson, Missouri, and everywhere, folks, just on and on. Police militarization, there it is, second paragraph. Militarization, most concretely evidenced in law enforcement's use of military weapons and vehicles acquired as hand-me-downs from the Pentagon, is a major contributing factor to the systemic problem of police brutality. Still, recent events, essentially no progress has been made in Washington toward eliminating the now controversial 1033 program, which has made deadly gifts possible. Now, it goes on and talks about more of this. The point about this is there's a way to go to your state to say, listen, these events have caused us a problem. First of all, let's get rid of the 1033 military equipment. And I would have to remind, and I'm reminded in my thought as I was reading that, of a listener sent me an email at markonthebeast@yahoo.com who reminded us that the police training comes from the Israeli terrorist people. They're all over. They go. Remember, I reported on that. There's links in the past broadcaster. This is the training is like this as well. And we heard about this a long time ago when we started. They were now going for headshots. And when we were given notice the police were going to start to take headshots and not body shots to stop somebody, that was our notice. It was going to go to execution mode. My point on all this is that there's states that are looking to that police brutality is in the awareness now. This is not just a conspiracy theory. This is a fact. People are noticing. This is time for those of you interested in this subject matter to take all these facts together and go where you need to go to make this change for you. Eliminate all the guesswork, the discretion given to these people that enter into jobs that the Supreme Court says you can be too smart and too psychologically stable to be in. Another one doing something. 16-year-old launches organization to battle warrantless surveillance. The 16-year-old kid. Folks, this is where we have to hand the baton to. I'm happy to see this kid with this age, with this awareness. There's a chance that this works out, folks. Brandon Keebler is just your ordinary 16-year-old from southern Indiana. Indiana, I think, has some of the most brutal type of socialist type fascist laws for cops anyway, so this might be where the oppression is meeting a resistance here, equal to it, and this is usually what you see in this other aspect that we look at. Whenever the oppression is the highest, there is something to come and meet it. There can be, and usually that's whoever wants to step up. In this case, Brandon Keebler has a 16-year-old, having become an activist at 14 and helping to establish and restore the Fourth Organization. This young man has just launched an organization to encourage grassroots efforts aimed at a tyrannical government that wishes to disregard the fact that they are bound by law to gain a warrant before they search or seize anything of any American citizen. This also includes warrantless surveillance of individuals. Project Digital Privacy was launched in January 24, 2015 as a result of increased social activism in regards to the government surveillance. According to the organization's website, technology and global communication has reached a steady rate of advancement with the new forms of communication devices and concepts being formed every day. As such, it is in the best interest of both citizens of the United States and the world to keep it from becoming corrupted in any manner. To preserve the powerful and ever-evolving nature of these advancements, we are organized that is dedicated to non-violently ending warrantless digital surveillance at a local level, close quote. Now, so this kid's coming along. What else is there to say? He's coming along to do this. I'm asking anybody, we got to stop talking about what we're going to do and start doing it. I come and I talk behind the woodshed just to tell you there's another place you can go. If a 16-year-old can, maybe you got a family yet, you may not have all the time in the world to be as involved. He's still got quite a few years yet that he can be involved without too much distraction. But when you get older and your family goes, then maybe you're entering back into when you can be viable to do this very same thing. It just takes stepping up. This is not silence. This has the potential of defeating this warrantless surveillance nonsense. Deputy fired for threatening to arrest photographer who took pictures of police in public. This is another way to resist. In a way, this is the record document taking side of what you're doing. You can help somebody out if they don't have their own. It's becoming almost as required necessity as anything else in your, almost as necessitous as breathing at some level. Certainly when you're faced with it, that you need to have someone that has a video camera. And at least have audio to record some of this. As I was talking yesterday or last week about the 70-year-old guy who went outside of the camera, that was probably not a smart thing. I wouldn't advocate that right now at all. A deputy fired for threatening to arrest photographer who took pictures of police in public. As we've covered before, courts have ruled time and again that the police can't force citizens to stop taking pictures of them in public so long as you don't interfere with their work. That doesn't stop cops from ordering people to put their cameras away, and didn't prevent a sheriff deputy in Washington state from making multiple empty threats to arrest against a Seattle news photographer who took pics of the police action in public. But after an investigation by the sheriff's department. The deputy was dismissed for abusing his authority. Won't read more. The point is, I want to extend. He says that this is press. The Supreme Court has come out and said that everyone is the press at some level, and that doesn't limit. You don't have to be official, professional, paid for press. That's all professional means you paid for. The difference between an amateur and a professional is the professional is paid, the amateur is not. Doesn't mean that the not being paid is not pro work if you can put it at that level. Someone would pay for it. So the point is that we have links on this other link. We have more links that you could have. You put in your bag of law. As I said, you'd have to have wherever you go. If you're in a car, you better have your bag of law for travel the road and all that kind of thing. And it's not necessarily to try and out-talk a cop. It's there to give him the law that he was supposed to recognize, so that when you go into court, if you ever get that far, if you don't convince him by that to avoid giving you the ticket, that he then that if you find yourself in the court, that you then ask him those questions, and that what you gave him knowledge of then at the point of first contact, that you're going to need a bag of law to do that, objective basis, not your opinion. He can see it for himself. You can bring that same bag into the court, but along with that is your recordings. Along with that is these court cases that say that they can't stop you. And what you're doing is you become an investigative reporter right there for your own sake. See, and you get off, you try to lower the tension by this prop called the bag of law, the bag of reality. In this case, you could actually use this story, just copy it, and say any cop that tries to stop you from doing that, you say, listen, this sheriff in this department found that this guy lost his job. Do you want to lose your job? I'm just standing over here filming you. If you're not doing anything illegal, no problem, right? So you have something in yourself to say, to make a presentation to anybody under a color of authority attempting to diminish you or maybe executing someone else. We're living in that day, folks. You could be watching an execution at any time. Now, one thing that did get executed you probably would like to hear about, was pretty interesting to me. Such a big deal this was over in Iceland. Of all the things those people are doing, on top of it, they did something else pretty fantastical, and they memorialized it. I'm not sure if you're aware, Iceland essentially outlawed McDonald's. And in a way, to memorialize that, they did something pretty phenomenal. And Iceland decided to do this with the latest McDonald's meal ever sold. The last meal in Iceland from McDonald's was collected up, and it's on display. After spending over a year in Iceland's National Museum, the last McDonald's meal sold in the country will now be going on display at the Bust Hostel in Reykjavik. The world-famous fast food chain shut down its Iceland locations in 2009, and even after all this time, the last meal sold in the country has still not become rotten or moldy. The picture's actually appetizing, folks, if you didn't know what you're looking at. It looks like, it reminds me of that plastic vegetable food. Anyway, there's a break from all the nastiness. People can do things right for themselves. This is memorializing the last McDonald's, and with food after all this time. It looks just scrumptious, folks. I'm just drooling almost. I better stop. Move on. Attempted land grab ends voters booting entire city council. Something else you can do. It rarely happens this way, and you see recalls going on, but it's not without ourselves to do so. Government officials like to use eminent domain for the convenience of their preferred policies and or enrichment of themselves and their buddies. Usually, they get away with it because the folks on the receiving end are too few and powerless to hold their tormentors to account. This is what we talk about all the time, folks. This is what I say. This is what the gentleman who worked it out with the county to stop some oppressors to come. He did it all by himself. This is just, you cannot get rid of all those people in the seat of decision if it's not good. In Hackensack, New Jersey, however, the officials who targeted Michael Monaghan's property for seizure as part of a, quote, area in need of redevelopment, even while denying him the right to develop it himself, pushed too many people around too often, and last month the voters booted out the entire city council. So, enough there. I don't have to read more. Actually, this is us finally saying enough is enough. This is the fraudulent use of eminent domain. I think it goes on to say they actually didn't have a standing. They just used it. Again, they know the words to use in order to make the paper and the record look like it's justified. And that silence against that make work, that make look right, is what kills us. What we do, the people I work with, and in coordination, we essentially attack that. We say that's maybe we attack the fraud of it right up front. You say you made this statement, but that's a fraud, and then you support it with evidence how that is a fraud. And you call these people to account. It's that simple at some level. It's just we have to be there to do it. And this is, here we am in a domain, I'm kind of property oriented this way. I figure if we can't defend our landed property, we're not going to be able to defend our own property of our own self. And this is what the vaccine discussion is. You have a property in yourself and your little ones to protect them, yourself, to make your decisions. Do you have that decision? Do you have that right? Is that a right? The government's challenging it. You're not peaceful and free and in tranquility, living in tranquility to stop that, are you? That alone should tell you don't live in a free society or one with rights, that you're deemed to be something else. And these people need to be tossed. These are the people that are doing it. They need to be tossed. Now, anymore, you have to do it. Their presumption of their lawfulness is agreed to by those that are going to make the decision, and the guys with the guns, the military with the guns. And so you have to bring a persuasive, polished, somewhat polished presentation. And I say polished only to the extent you don't talk about your rights. You execute them. You don't talk about facts, you present them. You don't show an opinion of a violation in law, you produce the law they're in violation of. And that's all. We don't have to, I've seen documents and so-called complaints going on and on and on and on, and they say nothing. Nothing. I was asked to review a Second Amendment ordinance. I said, what's the cause? The Second Amendment exists. It's presumed that it's being recognized. What's the cause for the county to recognize the Second Amendment? There's no cause. There's no statement of how it's not being recognized that an ordinance needs to fix. And it went on, 6 pages of all these statements and opinions, and it's really just a useless condition. That's not what you want to do. And so we have more evidence that we have it in our hands. It requires that we do, and the fact that we don't is reliance that we agree. Consent and silence is consent at some level, means you agree. And yet here, a whole city council gets put out on its ear. Now, I'm not saying that anybody that ran wasn't replacing the same parts. You'll have to notice and look for that, but that's a totally different type problem. At least just keep stirring it up. You're not sitting back and taking it. You're not watching your neighbor's house being taken, and the next thing is that your house is taken for some other private interest within the seat of decision in the council, while they enforce economic development, which is really just it's subsidy for parasites, the do-gooders, the partnerships, the private partnerships. These are all the economic development morons who will come in and they get lots of money to come back in a few weeks or a year to tell you all their great ideas of how that you can improve economic development. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. And then you as a taxpayer, whether by property or depending the state, depending on how they do their money, you end up having to pay for it. Some part of your life goes to pay for the parasite to exist. Bureaucratic parasites. That's all we have. They're hanging off of us like dingle balls. And it's all it's in our hands, folks. I just don't know what to say. It's just right there. I see it so close. It may take a little bit. The momentum's kind of against us, but you put a concerted effort to it, and like we've seen here, like I saw last week, a friend of mine, he prevails in the wrong he saw. At least prevails to end the immediate threat. Because I think these parasites are here for a long time yet. We still have to set the record that we as a people won't tolerate that part anymore. And that takes a little bit of work. It takes a whole lot more than sitting behind our keyboards. Although, sending an email to a representative, that takes your keyboard. So it's not that that's the problem. It's that you have to have interaction and engagement in a substantive way to cause the change that you hope. And otherwise, you have to be the change, as we've heard. You have to be that change, the real change, the real lifestyle that you want. You have to example that and advance it. It won't. Others are doing theirs, and that's what's going on. And what has the mind is this adulteration of what ought to be, that is foreign to our United States of America, at least, and because our nation comes from a productive class. And we know that because of the land disposal. That's the other thing about this. We almost are condemned, and I think properly so, in protective mode, protective capacity. We come from the land. The law of the land is literal here, not just some sense of law that's been written by a bunch of people who could care less about you. This is the law of the land, and when it becomes asserted, the law of property gets asserted and insisted to be protected, like the founding documents, so-called, that are to be followed, is asserted. Wow, it just cleans stuff right up. It really starts to clean things right up. And so what this foreign ideas come in and they adulterate our way of life. And one of them, and I'm finally getting back, months ago now, I was talking about the public trust doctrine, and then so much seemed to get in the way, and I'm finally back down to it. We'll have a little bit of time here to discuss a bit of this. One of the adulterations to us is these impositions of these foreign ideas that really have no place, but they are given ground to grow in. And then there's a whole system and mechanism of people that are willing to jump in on I can't get away from the idea. They're just parasites. They realize it's just bureaucracy. And if they create bureaucracy and they're in a part of it, they get money literally for nothing. They make up something to do, and they're sitting in the decision, since they made it up, to receive what that thing is they created, that the so-called law, the legal, allowed. That was never challenged as to whether or not that provision was actually a constitutional or as applied, or constitutional as applied. That's another point that you need to take a note of. All these things are challenge points that I don't hear many people do at all, that are much better than railing and ranting about how all the founders, whatever their statements were and what they said, and all the great sounding things that go on, and all the things you thought were being protective of you. You're the only one that's protecting of you. It's not these phrases and these statements. So getting into this trust doctrine, I want to point out a couple things. This is coming in on you. This is one part of the agenda. They call it the public trust doctrine. It could be moved into, as you start to see how they're using it, this is the police power in a different term. And this police power is what's defeating us when it's now not delineated clearly. The police power, what did I just say? This is the right they have to execute us. And they have a bar association member in a black robe to back that up. It's their construct there. Those people that have made it. And I can tell you that we haven't, because I don't know of many people that have engaged themselves to be able to be a part of what there is. It just is. That's the reality. It doesn't mean that it's all that you see conforms to law. It may be legal, but it may not be lawful. Now, this public trust doctrine is an imposition of a foreign element in this country that works in application. It works like a police power invocation. In California, for instance, I'm reading a document that I had before. I'll just read it. We'll get into this a little bit. And I just want to touch a couple things and essentially show you how it gets used to defeat you when the law actually is already written to not allow this, and a bar member would disregard the law. And because no one comes up and asserts the law, you get defeated. And we found this, as I was talking to you, I was revisiting a case that's been just a scourge for miners. It's being used to beat miners down. It's the Granite Rock case. And I addressed an attorney 10 or so years ago. I said, you can't use that case and assert the grant of the property, the disposal. You'll only be asserting the privilege under commerce. And I said, that's all wrong. You're going to be fighting this thing to a no good end. Well, that was his end, it seems. Now, it's come up as I was researching this case. It now comes up in some recent cases I was describing last week, and thank you for all the miners that came in and downloaded the podcast and listened to that. I hope you got another insight, and anybody that came back this week, I appreciate that you did. I know I'm a little bit off of that topic, but this is how this program works, this broadcast works, in trying to bring up different aspects, the principles of which really fiddle through a lot of things we do. But that the Granite Rock case, the Supreme Court decision, was really not a decision. It was a big question. And that question is being used by the Bar Association and by the attorneys and the courts to continue to club minors like they're little baby seals. When you look in that court case decision, you find tons of things in it that are exactly what I've been saying, that actually recognizes coordination. It actually recognizes when the state, in a concurring but contrary discussion, expanded discussion, it says when California didn't coordinate with the federal government, it acceded to the federal plan. Exactly what we've been saying, why a local government or the state has to coordinate. Exactly how the state is coordinating at the governor's level to defeat all people when they make the plans with the alternatives that are felonies. And then they get the BLM or the Forest Service just to execute the plan that no one knew about. And they're using this governors right now are using this public trust doctrine as a guideline. But so let me read about it, because I want to get to an interesting little point, how it encroaches and how they do this. And if you don't know this, they get us. And if you were just to assert the fact, like the Granite Rock case says, the attorneys, they didn't present the right case. There's more here that we're not able to decide because the attorneys didn't present it. That case tells you that people with property rights are being thrown under the bus, and they use these fictitious doctrines in order to do it. The public trust doctrine, as we reference California, historically was referred to the right of the public to use California's waterways to engage in, quote, commerce, navigation, and fisheries. Commerce, navigation, and fisheries. What have I been saying forever? That the limited jurisdiction of the state is over commerce, navigation, which is commerce, and fisheries, which is commerce. Now, as I told you about the right of Piscari, is not fisheries. You're not an angler. An angler is a fisherman in the fisheries. As the right of Piscari is the right to take fish for subsistence. If you don't, if you say it that way, though, the bar member will beat you down. But that's what you're doing. And if you have the right words, you find out how criminal they are quickly. Public trust doctrine historically was referred to as the right of the public to use the California waterways to engage in commerce, essentially. Talked about navigable rivers. Most recently, the doctrine has been defined by the courts as providing the public the right to use the California water resources for navigation, fisheries, commerce, environmental preservation, and recreation. As ecological units, therefore, scientific study, or open space as environments which provide food and habitats for birds and marine life, as well as environments which favorably affect the scenery and the climate of the area. Citing a National Audubon Society versus Superior Court of Alpine County 1983 case. The Supreme Court of California held that the public trust doctrine protects not only navigation, commerce, wildlife, and fishing, but also changing public needs of ecological preservation, open space maintenance, and science and scenic and wildlife preservation. That's their statement, and they're sticking to it. But when you go read what they use that for, you find out that they extend that narrow area of navigable river, which is only to the green line, the high water mark, within a declared navigable waterway for the purpose of navigation. It's not supposed to extend outside of that, which is what the term the EPA is now, and the Army Corps of Engineers is trying to change in defining the term waters of the United States, which is already defined. It's defined as navigable rivers. And they want to extend these words because the EPA is an extension of this adulterated agenda. Now we move on to a court case that I was going to talk to just quickly, just to point something out. That groundwater extraction, this is a California case, can be subject to public trust doctrine. Judge Alan Sumner we talked about this was supposed to be navigable waters in commerce jurisdiction. And this judge says that groundwater extraction can be subject. Judge Alan Sumner has issued a tentative ruling in the case of the Environmental Law Foundation versus State Water Resources Control Board, answering the question of whether the public trust doctrine applies to the groundwater extraction. Judge Alan Sumner has issued a tentative ruling, which actually should have been out. I haven't been back to see it, but this is what haven't had a chance to go back. But here we are, a ruling in the case of Environmental Law Foundation versus State Water Resources Board Commission, answering the question as to whether the public trust doctrine applies to groundwater extraction. ELF seeks a number of remedies, including the declaration of the PTD. It applies to the management of groundwater, an injunction against Siskiyou County calling for a halt to the issuance of well drilling permits in the Scott River Basin until the county adopts the process and includes PTD considerations. Now, this county and the Scott River is underneath an attack by the federal government over those dams that it feeds into the Klamath River. Those dams of which was a Bureau of Reclamation's project where the government undertook and guaranteed to the people in the agriculture water supplies, no different than the California agricultural people just made an agreement with the government over. Now, so he says that they can be. Well, I would have to wonder if that's really the case, because waters of the United States, which is what the public trust doctrine would cover, in another document out of California and defined by the state but through federal code, waters of the United States means surface water and water bodies as defined by the EPA regulations. All waters of the United States and California are also waters of the state, defined in Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act as any surface water or groundwater, including saline waters, within the boundaries of the state. But then it goes on to say, not all waters of the state, i.e. groundwater, are waters of the United States. And so you see the conundrum in the rule, in the anomaly in the definition, but it actually makes an explicit exception to groundwater, which would completely trump what the judge says that they can be. And so here we have a judge more likely on the agenda, on the dole, who's going to impose his rule and redefinition, which he's not supposed to do, over whether or not groundwater, which when you see well drilling, that isn't even in the same aquifer set. That's actually has to go beyond and into solid rock in an aquifer that's under and will not feed. That you're seeing the corruption of your property rights and the use of water as a vehicle to take you out. That comes underneath environmental considerations that if you go look at the Granite Rock case says, that might be an imposition that can't be put on anything. That may be a fraudulent dissection of land use law. Again, as I say, the granted, it appears to be a question rather than a basis from which a decision can be made, the basis from which, again, the rules of what's reasonable imposition could be upon a congressional grant, which water is. It's a grant of appropriation. Groundwater being one of those that would be within the lines of your own property. And so we see the extension of a felony, essentially, the color of authority, taking away a right, even despite what the codes say. And I'm going to run out of time, I think, by now to say more, but I brought up more California code regulations to explain a lot of these things, and they're really consistent because they come out of federal law, where this definition recites 40 CFR section 122. That's federal law under EPA, not state law. So these state agencies are actually federal surrogates. They're not even under California law. That if you look at the terms are very consistent, but private to California, they're very consistent with the National Environmental Policy Act implementation, which requires a major federal action. In other words, this would equate to a major federal state action, a project. It's not private. Even the private project means the project that will be carried out by a person other than a governmental agency, but that will need discretionary approval from one or more governmental agencies. Well, you have a right to your groundwater. So the imposition of a discretionary approval is actually unconstitutional. And so this is about projects. You don't have a project when you go get your water, go for your water. That's your right. But they make all these things public projects, and we buy into this. So as a public project groundwater extraction condition, maybe the judge would be right, but not because of what it's called. Thanks for tuning in today. It looks like we're over. Appreciate all your inputs. MarkOnTheBeach.yahoo.com. Stay tuned to your hosts. Thank you very much for all the music before the...